Time to talk some cricket. Well, the West Indies were made to work hard for a 17-run victory over the United Arab Emirates in their first official warm-up match ahead of the ICC T20 World Cup in Australia, Sunday evening Caribbean time. The Windies batted first and posted 152 for 9 from their 20 overs. Brandon King led them with 64 against medium pacer Junaid Siddique's career best 5 for 13. They set 153 to win. The UAE were restricted to 135 for 6, and Ricardo Chambers looks back at the contest.
West Indies sent to bat by the UAE at Junction Oval in Melbourne. Evan Lewis brought in, but was quickly sent back.
High, it could be caught. It is caught.
The left-hander making 2 from 5. Fellow opener Johnson Charles also struggled, posting just 1 run from 7 deliveries before he was bowled off a full toss. West Indies 10 for 2 in the third over at that stage. Shamar Brooks, the replacement for Shimran Hetmar, was unable to hit the ground running, contributing 4 from 3 deliveries. West Indies in trouble at 22 for 3 at his dismissal. However, Brandon King and Captain Nicholas Pooran steadied the Caribbean ship. King top scored with 64 of 45 deliveries, which included 7 fours and 2 sixes.
Oh, that's a good shot. Yeah,
while Pooran struck 5 sixes in his 46 of 31.
Massive, almost up to us. Huge 6.
Alzara Joseph with 15 was the only other batter in double figures, as the Windies posted 152 for 9 from their 20. Pace bowler Junaid Siddique grabbed 5 for 13 for the UAE.
What a performance.
Set 153 for victory. The UAE lost wickets at regular intervals. Evan Lewis effected a brilliant run out to leave them struggling at 53 for 4 in the 10th, while Raymond Reefer bagged 3 for 17 to stifle the opposition. And although opener Mohammed Wasim struck some massive blows in his unbeaten 69 of 52,
massive. That's gone out of the place. Over the trees, find that.
And shared an unbroken 53 for the 7th wicket with Zawar Farid, the West Indies held on to win by 17 runs.
Well, we're joined now by international cricket commentator Fazeer Mohammed to review the Windies' performance. Welcome, Faz.
Good to be on the show once again, Mariah.
Yes, so Faz, a much-needed win for the West Indies. Of course, they need the confidence as they get ready for the World Cup.
True, but I don't know how much confidence they would have gotten from this match. Let's remember, first and foremost, it wasn't a full-fledged T20 international. The West Indies batted with 12. They used bowlers who didn't bat. So it was essentially a glorified warm-up. But having said all of that, you got a couple of scores, and that was it. The next best was 15. And you're talking about the opposition being the United Arab Emirates. No discrediting them, but they are not one of your elite teams in international cricket. So for the West Indies batting to struggle again raises questions when you go really into the main draw, if the West Indies do get to the main draw, because remember, next week it's Scotland, Ireland, Zimbabwe for the West Indies in the qualifying phase of the competition. Granted, they've got one more warm-up match on Wednesday against the Netherlands, but I think there'll be real concern about the stability, or actually the productivity, of the West Indies batting lineup.
Yeah, and first, speaking about concern, a lot of questions were surrounding Evan Lewis being a part of the team, but of course, not performing, not playing. He got the opportunity and he could only manage to score 2. What say you about, his performance, and of course, the fact that he has to get off if West Indies, they're to challenge any of these teams?
Well, the fact remains, and again, I place it on the record that I don't believe he should have been selected for the reasons of his prolonged absence and apparent indifference to representing the West Indies. But he's there. But having said all of that, he didn't play in the first 2 matches, the 2 T20 internationals against Australia. For someone who had been out of West Indies contention or West Indies duty for so long, you'd have thought he would have been put in at the closest opportunity. Now he's gotten a chance against the relatively mild-mannered UAE, and he's failed. More than likely, he'll be given another chance against the Netherlands. But if he were to get runs, does he automatically come into the team? Do you go with maybe Kyle Mayers, Brandon King as your opening pair, and then you shuffle things around? Shamar Brooks, if he gets a score in the next match, comes in as well. So there are some options there. There are some decisions to be made by the selection panel, by the captain Nicholas Pooran and the coach Phil Simmons. But that doesn't change the fact about the way the West Indies are batting right now is genuine cause for concern.
Yeah, definitely a cause for concern. And Faz, with the ball, we had Raymond Rifa, coming up trumps. What did you make of his performance? And of course, just the complete bowling effort.
Well, when you look at the overall bowling effort, I think more than anything else, they did a decent job. The concern would be Obed McCoy. He was very expensive. His 4 overs went for almost 13 runs. There's a concern to an injury to Yannick Correa, because just a few minutes ago, there was an update given by Philip Spooner, who's the West Indies traveling media man. He indicated that it's no fracture, just minor bruising. He was struck on the right hand while batting earlier today and had to retire hurt. And he's a leg spinner, which means that he uses that right hand. Will that be a factor, if he is to be considered at all, for those matches coming up next week? So that's an additional consideration in the bowling department. But I think generally the West Indies bowlers had things under control against the UAE. But again, having said all of that, doing well against the UAE, winning by just over a dozen runs, doesn't exactly inspire tremendous confidence if you're talking about getting into the main draw of a World T20.
Yeah, talk about a shot in the arm needed. That certainly wasn't. That was a syringe with water rather than a syringe with something to really pep you up. Faz, just going back to the issue of Evan Lewis and the opening position, we've seen we've seen all of these boys in the CPL not so long ago, thank goodness, and transitioning straight to Australia for the 2 warm-up games, and then this, 2 games against Australia, that 2-game series, and then this warm-up game. So 3 games in Australia already in preparation for this World Cup. Isn't it sensible to, unless he's knocking it big in training, rule Evan Lewis out of this first match of the qualifiers, and our opening pair has to be Brandon King on somebody, because based on CPL form, based on what we've seen today, based on the fact that they chose not to use him in the 2 games against Australia, Evan Lewis is both out of form and undercooked, and it would be a travesty to have, my term, travesty to have Brandon King bat at 3 in a lineup where it's not as if the opening pair who would open the innings instead of him are uprooting trees and have good form to recommend them.
Well, I would certainly hope it's not decided automatically that Evan Lewis is going to open for that first match next week in the actual qualifying for the World T20, because that can't be right. Because as you intimated, even if he's crashing it up the middle of the bat in the nets, that's just the nets. And we're only speculating here. The fact is, again, he had an ordinary CPL, hasn't played for the West Indies for a year, misses is not selected because he was there, wasn't selected for the first couple of matches, the T20 internationals against Australia, fails here. So, I mean, there is nothing at this point to mandate even the remotest consideration that he should be in the team. And if it is that the selection panel have already decided that Evan Lewis is a sure pick, then I struggle to understand the rationale for it.
The issue of experience and tournament winning experience. We had a good debate inside the zone room, that place again, about the West Indies being a T20 tournament team, given our record in the tournament since the T20 World Cup started. Johnson Charles, the only survivor from the last time we won the tournament in 2016. So there is a shortage of men who've climbed this mountain with us, or for us already. Is that a good or a bad thing for this bunch?
This tournament team thing carried a lot of water 2012 and into 2016. I think the barrel emptied in UAE last year when all of the big name players fell flat and the West Indies finished 4th of 5 teams in their grouping. So this idea that you need to have those few players with tournament experience, notwithstanding their form, really doesn't make a lot of sense. Because again, the West Indies have been struggling for most of the year in the T20 format. They've done very little to inspire a tremendous amount of confidence. The few players who've done well surely should be at the head of the queue when it comes to being selected once you've got a proper combination, because you can't just pick automatically everyone who's in form, because you've got to decide on your balance. Someone like Kyle Mayers can give you a couple of overs if it's required and so on. Shamar Brooks, he just come from the Caribbean, a late arrival because of the Shimron at Maya nonsense. So you've got a number of considerations here, but I think one thing that is out of the reckoning is this whole thing of tournament play, because that went out the window last year in the UAE with all the big names, again, who didn't deliver. So I don't see any consideration for that at all.
Happy you addressed that to shut that down, because I know that argument will spring up, especially if we start soft in the qualifiers. I need to lean on your experience now, Fazeer, of Australian conditions and what you know of them. Because here's the thing. Going into the last T20 World Cup, the record of teams in T20s batting first or second was almost 50-50. The teams batting first won 49.78% of the games. Of course, the rest would be won by the team batting second, so almost 50-50. But, as you know very well, the last T20 World Cup, Australia played 7 games, batted second 6 times, won all 6 of those games. The one game they batted first in, they lost that 7th game. So it reached a point in the last World Cup where the skippers were deathly afraid of calling wrong, because batting first meant you're almost sure to lose the game. Again, that was largely dependent on conditions in that part of the world. Based on the conditions in Australia, will the toss be as critical a factor this time as it definitely was last T20 World Cup?
I don't think so. The only consideration would be that this is mid-October into mid-November, which is sort of like their springtime coming into the summer period. So the pitches might be a bit juicier than usual, but they're always harder and firmer than anywhere else in the world, certainly when you compare them with the UAE last year. So I think you're going to see decisions being made essentially on the conditions in any given day, any given morning, any given afternoon, if it's a day-night match, because the Australian conditions tend to be far more conducive to a proper game of cricket over a long period of time. You'd hardly see a situation in an Australian pitch, on an Australian surface, where it's playing slow and low at any time, and you want to bat first because the pitch is going to deteriorate rapidly later on. There's going to be a dew factor. That hardly ever comes into the consideration in Australia. But as I said, mid-October into mid-November, there might be some consideration of greener pitches than usual, but I don't think the UAE template can be transposed to Australia.
Hear you on that, my friend. Thank you. All right.
Yeah. Okay.
Oh,
so
we have to break. I thought you were saying something. All right, Fraz, that's all the time we have. We got our wires crossed there. Thank you very much, my friend. We'll have much more to talk. I'm tempted to ask you about who you think is best equipped to be our star player for the tournament, if there is indeed a star player. But that's a question I'll ask another time, so you can prepare your response to that. Thank you.
No problem at all.
Good. The gentleman, Fazeer Mohammed, there talking cricket with us as we reflect on the West Indies' performance against the UAE and their prospects for the qualifiers to come starting next week.
yeah, of course, we're looking forward for that to see, if West Indies can turn around their form.
Yeah, Sir Andy said it best, Sir Andy Roberts. These qualifiers, some people are looking past it. With this West Indies, I'm not. I want the boys to, of course, be successful, but I'm not approaching these qualifiers with any. I'm not bringing with confidence, I must admit.
Yeah, no, they have to want it for themselves. Well, George, we'll look forward to that. We'll have our America's Netball World Cup qualifying segment later, but before then, we'll talk football. Arsenal's today top of the EPL is Mikel Arteta's side ready to push Manchester City all the way. There's also our La Liga segment where Real Madrid and Barcelona are locked at the top of the table. And we are 8 days away from the start of the new NBA season. Remember, your home of champions will have the NBA all season long on all our platforms, SportsMax, SportsMax 2, and you can always catch it on the SportsMax app.